Hi everyone, this slideshow is going to focus on the other aspect of research methods that narrative journalists often conduct, and that is interviewing. So we're going to look at those approaches that narrative journalists would typically take when interviewing their subjects. As mentioned in other slideshows, narrative journalists do spend a lot more time with their subjects. They are having multiple sessions of observation and interviewing. One thing to note is that during an interviewing process or during an interview, narrative journalists are doing two things. Or three things, I should say. They are interviewing, they're asking questions, they are writing down their thoughts, the subject's answers to the questions, but they're also looking at the behavior. So they're also observing at the same time as interviewing their subject. The questions that narrative journalists are often asking are how their feelings are about an experience that happened to them, or they're trying to get them to recollect their experiences so that they can get details in order to depict scenes. We're wanting their thoughts, we're wanting their opinions on the experiences, we're wanting to really get to know the character as well as the scene. And because of that, we are not focusing on the in front of the news approach. We're looking at the behind the news approach. So we're wanting to know what happens behind the scenes, and that is the individuals, the subjects, the characters' thoughts and opinions on something that may not typically be seen in a news story, in order to develop these characters correctly and correctly depict them as who they actually are in real life. When you're conducting your interview, you want to consider a few different things, and a lot of this will be referred to in the proposal assignment. So you're going to pick a topic. You want something meaningful and interesting to you because you will be writing 10 to 15 pages on it eventually. Could be meaning to society, your community, your subjects. Could be one person, it could be multiple. You want to make sure to ask your subject for consent to interview and observe, of course. They should hopefully have a personal account on the topic. They can't just be a random subject or on with a random topic. They need to have some kind of correlation. There needs to be a reason why you're interviewing and observing this subject. And yes, refer to them as subject A, subject B if you're doing multiple. You're also going to create an interview script or an interview guide, which is just an outline of the questions you want to ask your subject. And I do have an example of this in the interview mini assignment. And this is just a general guide. You don't have to follow it expressively. In fact, you probably won't in your interview. Often interview questions happen and then more just kind of occur within it. Perhaps the subject goes on and describes something really well that you think of another question, and it's totally okay to ask that question. But in your field notes, which is your notes that you're going to be taking while you're observing and while you're interviewing, you're going to want to write down that question because you're not going to have evidence of that question. And then also try to remember their answer as well, write it down, etc. If you're going to be recording your interview, which we will not be in this class, you would obviously want to ask for consent. Video recording is nice because it does show subjects' behaviors, but it's not necessary for narrative journalism. We really want to focus on you taking notes in your field notes. You can then record there what behaviors you noticed, your thoughts, your observations, and then create that transcript, which would be after, but we aren't going to do that in this class. As said earlier, narrative journalists do spend a lot of time with their subjects generally. We are not going to be able to spend as much time as a typical narrative journalist would. However, you want to try to both remain professional, respectful, but also friendly. You want to make sure that you are giving off vibes that you are comfortable with them so that they are comfortable with you. Your own behaviors are important. Your body language is important. Do not interrupt the subject. The subject is the one who should be talking the most. The interviewer is only there to ask questions. We are simply wanting the subject to answer the questions in full detail and not be interrupted so that we can get as much content from them as possible so that we can directly apply to our stories. Your appearance, you should also dress professionally but remain approachable. So you don't need to be in a suit and tie, but just make sure that you're dressed nicely. Some tips for your interview. When you're creating that interview guide, you want to make sure your questions are clear, short, and open-ended. And what open-ended means is that you are not asking a yes or no question. You are asking a question that can be asked with multiple words, multiple sentences. And then you also want to word those questions neutrally and without bias. You don't want to lead into something that is negative or positive. You want it to try to remain neutral so that the subject doesn't have like a feeling towards it already. They just go in with their thoughts and their opinions, and they don't have to consider how the interviewer is thinking about this question. You also want to leave room for follow-up questions. As mentioned in the previous slide, we are going to have instances where you're going to want to ask more questions than were planned for in your guide. Just be aware that this will happen. Your location is also very important. You both want to be comfortable, but it is a little more important for your subject to be more comfortable. So you can easily pick a neutral location, somewhere quiet. But you can also give them the choice for the setting so that they feel more comfortable if it's in their house. If you feel comfortable with that, then that's okay. If you want to meet in a more public setting, that's okay too. You do not have to record your interview. It is not required. We do not need you to. However, generally recording may help you remember things. And then you also want to ask one question at a time. You don't want to bombard them. It could stress them out. They may not end up answering all of the questions. And then, as mentioned earlier as well, while you're taking your field notes, you're going to be observing as well. You're going to be observing those mannerisms, thoughts, and everything like that that comes across. You're going to want to write those down and make sure to steer the conversation so that you answer the questions. Sometimes subjects may get on tangents with things that are not necessarily valuable to your research, but make sure to still listen to responses, be respectful, and say, let's get back to this question as nicely and respectful as possible, and then ask more questions when needed. If they don't have an answer for something, you could try rephrasing or just skip to the next question. It's important to remember that your interviewing that you're doing, your observations that you're doing, they're going to inform the content of your story. Interviews are going to be the central aspect for describing scenes as well as characters, but specifically like that background information surrounding it all. Interviewing subjects will again allow you to get to know your characters or your subject, to know who they are so that you can accurately depict them. You don't need to read your transcript. You don't need to watch your interview because that's not required, but make sure to read through your field notes and come up with possible themes that are arising from the experience so that you can continue to discuss that theme or hint at that theme throughout the story. Thank you for watching. This is my references for the information on these slides. If you have any further questions on the slides or the homework assignments, please reach out to me. My email is on the syllabus or on the homepage. Thank you for watching.